Welcome to the inaugural podcast of the Farmstead Revival. I'm Janelle Anderson, and I am joined with my co-host, who happens to be my littlest sister, Trudi Skedsvold. We are so excited to be here. We're going to talk about all things farming, ranching. We can call it farmstead. We can call it a homestead. We've seen it all. We've been a part of it all. And we're really excited to talk into each of these topics that we are going to bring to you this season. Trudi, where are you coming from today?
I am in a camper in North Carolina.
Why are you in a camper, Trudi?
We moved here 2 years ago, and we've been living in a camper ever since, trying to figure out what we wanted to build for our house. And we just are still living in this camper with 3 kids, 2 little dogs, and me and my husband.
Yeah, and lots of animals outside, which we'll get to. I think what's really funny about both my sister and I is that we moved from Wisconsin, where we grew up, to North Dakota, and we'll talk about all of that kind of stuff. And then we landed in the South. So she's, as she said, she's in North Carolina. I'm in southern middle Tennessee. But here's the kicker. We both started our farms now that we live on. They were raw land when we started them. And so I think that brings a really unique perspective to all of this stuff that we're going to talk about, just because of our experiences, what we've lived through, but also what we are living through currently right now and setting up and all of that kind of stuff. And so what I said is that we grew up in Wisconsin. I would say that what we did, people would call homesteading now, but we just lived country or rural. Would you say that, Trudi?
We were country.
We were country. We lived in why are we throwing in southern? We live in the South now, but we didn't always have Southern accents that are fake. These are fake accents.
Absolutely fake.
We're very Northern, but we did. We lived in the country, and I'm really grateful to our parents for the opportunities that we were given for our childhood. We were raised in a way that has served both Trudi and I and our families well as my brother. I can't say my sister, our other sister. She lives in the city.
She's a city.
She's a city girl.
I was going to say city folk.
Yeah, she's a city girl. But it has really served us really well in all that we've done. And not only since we've been in the South, but what we did after we left Wisconsin. All right, so we're going to dive into our experience of how we grew up, where we're coming from. And I can start with when we moved to the country from the city when I was, I think, in second grade. I think I was 8 years old is about what it was. And we lived in this really old, gross farmhouse that had rats and bats. I hope we tell you stories about bats in that house and my dad, because it's pretty fantastic.
I was a baby, so I don't remember.
Yeah, you were pretty little. And while we were living there, my parents were building the home that we would move into across the highway. They built a log cabin for us that we moved into, and it was just kind of...
It was on 60 acres, right?
Yeah, we were about at 60 acres. And the house that they built was just phenomenal. For my dad to be able to do that. And I do, my mom, she helped. I mean, we were pretty small still. My brother is a couple years older than I am, and he helped some, but it was mostly my dad and my mom, and then friends coming in and helping them. So it's really cool that was just kind of our basis for growing up.
A beautiful log cabin in the woods. That is what I will always remember.
Yeah, it was pretty phenomenal. And so part of the property bordered about 3/4 of a way around a private lake. And so we had water, we had trees, we had pastures, we had all of the things. So Trudi, you want to jump into it and say some of the things that you really pointed out and wrote down that you wanted to talk about today about like our childhood?
I just wanted to say that like our dad really kind of encouraged us to be in, I guess, agriculture and kind of independent of sorts, because he taught us how to hunt. That was one of the like newest memories I remember of being with my dad, is going out and just hunting with my dad. We would sit in the tree stand. He had this tree stand on telephone poles, and it's at the top of these really huge telephone poles, and you could see forever. And I just remember going up there early in the morning, it'd be like 5 o'clock in the morning, and you just go out there in the dark and you get up there and you just spend time with him and just
he brought M&Ms and he brought Mountain Dew.
all of the snacks. But you also had to be quiet, which was really super hard for me because I really love to talk. And so it taught me how to scale back and kind of just listen and look and not talk, which is really hard. Still to this day is really hard to do.
That's super
Janelle can attest.
Yeah, that's super funny. I'm glad you brought up the hunting right away because my dad's backstory, at least in part, there was a part of his childhood and in his teenage years where his family fell on some really hard times and were going through some really rough patches. And my dad and his younger brother would go out and hunt for their family's food so that they had food to eat. And then there was a local farmer up the road that gave them milk. And I don't remember what else, but just it was very and eggs.
Gave them eggs.
Yeah, so very lean times, but it was when my dad was able to provide for his family even as a teenager. And I think that experience is in part why he took us with him, and he brought us not only to hunt, to fish, to understand all of that kind of stuff, but also construction, also growing and raising our own food, if we're going to talk about domesticated animals. And so I think that is probably what spurred him on, is he wanted us, if we ever faced something like that, that we would not be left trying to figure out how to feed our families.
Absolutely. And I don't think we were spared because we were girls, because obviously he had an older son.
Okay, we were not spared, but my sister Amanda was spared because she said she was a wimp and she couldn't do anything.
I remember Amanda telling me that she couldn't carry buckets, and I was like, here, I got them. She's like, oh, you're so strong. She just tricked me into carrying her buckets.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I used to get mad at her because she was younger than me, but still older than you. And I was like, come on, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
No. Not everybody enjoyed the life that we lived, but I mean, at the time, you probably don't enjoy it as much as you do now, because obviously it set you up for success in being a rancher's wife and being on your own in agriculture and taking care of stuff. I will say that Dad also had lots of random animals. Not only did we go hunting and stuff, we also had random animals that he would pick up. He had pigs that he picked up. We would always have butcher pigs out in the pen that we would have to take care of. We had goats that we would also take care of, and chickens.
Yeah, I remember Dad picked up a sheep one time at the auction, and I was like, oh, we're going to have a sheep here. But that was not there after 3 days because he butchered it.
We learned very quickly that things don't stick around very long because they are meant for food. They're not always meant for fun and to love on. So that is actually a really good thing. So we just knew that we couldn't fall in love with the animal because it might not be there the next day. I mean, I remember Dad getting a potbelly pig from someone that couldn't move with their potbelly pig. And we were excited to have this potbelly pig. It ate dog food for its entire life. And then the potbelly pig wasn't outside anymore. And we ended up eating this potbelly pig. And it was the most terrible thing in the entire world because it was fed dog food.
That's what I was going to say. Do you mean it was the most terrible thing because Dad processed another one of our pets, or the taste? The taste.
It was
bad.
the taste. Okay. The taste was disgusting. We had
I don't
chicken.
remember the potbelly pig.
Oh, yeah. I remember that being gross. So not all of his ideas were great ideas, but yeah. I mean, that's kind of, you bounce them off a wall and you see if they stick, and that one did not stick. We had chickens growing up. We had ducks. We had geese. We always were out there collecting eggs. The problem was that sometimes we weren't the best at remembering to collect eggs. So I will say, as an adult, I make sure that my children are on top of collecting eggs, because I remember trying to bake. Do you remember trying to bake with the eggs, and you'd have to crack them in a cup? And if you didn't crack them in a cup and check if they were okay or rotten or have a baby inside of them,
yeah,
it would ruin your whole cake.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think if you have chickens and you are keeping the eggs, it's just a good practice to just always crack in a separate bowl.
You just never know what's inside of them.
Especially if your kids are in charge of collecting eggs.
Mm-hmm. And then we also had horses. We had lots of horses that we just kind of would go out and we would just go ride for hours. I mean, me growing up, I was more into horses. I think Janelle and my other siblings were kind of into them when they were younger, and then they kind of grew out of them as they got older. I never kind of went away from that. I kind of just stuck with horses. I really loved horses. Me and my friend, I taught her how to ride my best friend, and we rode every day. We would go ride at night. We would sneak out in the middle of the night, like just dedicated horseback riders. And I think that was something that we got from our mom. So mom didn't grow up on a farm or anything like that, and so I know that the first horse that she ever got, she had to pay for herself, and then she also had to board it somewhere. And so I think her love kind of came from that, of having her own horse and loving on it, and she taught all of us how to ride. I remember being really little when she taught me how to ride.
Mm-hmm. I don't ever even remember her teaching us to ride, but I'm sure she did. I think we just got
so
on
young.
The horses. Did it? I don't know.
I mean, I will say that one time Janelle didn't follow directions, and it was the worst moment of my life. She was told not to run, and Janelle didn't listen, and so she took off running. My horse took off running because she was younger, and she didn't want to listen to me, and so I couldn't stop her. Well, Amanda's horse took off running as well, our middle sister, and her horse wouldn't stop. She passed me, and Janelle just kind of stood and slowed her horse up and just kind of stayed back. Well, our horses had taken off for home. I had to bail off my horse, landed in prickers and rocks. Amanda bailed off of her horse and landed in grass.
I would never.
Mm-hmm. And then our mom did the most Western thing I've ever heard in my life. She was training a horse in a round pen, and heard the horses coming, and she was like, I told those girls not to run. And then she grabbed the first horse that showed up to her, and she hopped on that horse, and she took off at a dead run to come find us, because obviously she knew something bad had happened.
And it wasn't that bad. Everybody was fine.
Everybody was fine. I mean, no, Janelle was fine because she stayed on her horse.
I'm not going to tattle on myself, but there is another horse story we should tell since we are talking about mom. We were riding one time, and she told me not to take off again because she was on a really green broke horse that had just come back from the trainer, and I might have taken off, and her horse started bucking and bucked her off, and my horse was crow hopping, but I stayed on.
Oh my gosh, that's so terrible.
I know, you should ask her about it. She loves to talk about it.
I'm sure she would hate that.
No, she actually likes to tell that story.
Because you didn't listen.
Yeah.
Just like the story of your life. But yeah, so
we all have a problem listening. Let's just be real.
Listening is hard. Definitely hard.
Let's not tattle on ourselves anymore.
Okay.
About that.
So yes, horses and just all of the animals that we grew up with kind of formed who we are. He also was into just finding and making stuff. Like, I just remember him, he would get deals.
Well,
he was a barter.
He was a barter. We will say that he absolutely loved to barter and trade, but he always told us he got these deals. But I think some of these deals were not deals, but he didn't want to tell us the full story.
Yeah, well, we will never know.
We'll never know.
If you've ever seen the movie Fish, is it Fish Story? Fish Tale? No.
I don't know.
Big Fish. It's called Big Fish, and that is what he is based off of. That movie. You never know if the story is true or false.
That's so good.
But yes, so we had a really good childhood growing up. We just really embraced all of that. I don't think we appreciated it as much as we do now, but it was something that formed us as adults, I feel.
I know I didn't appreciate it back then because I remember he brought home a whole pen. I mean, at least 10 bottle calves. And, if you've ever had a bottle calf, at first you're like, this is the cutest thing in the world. It's the best thing. After a while, it's not the greatest, especially when you are the ones having to do the chores. And so what we would have to do is we'd have to go to the house, go into the basement, fill up a 5-gallon bucket with warm water, because of course he brought it home in the winter, brought these steers home. And so we would have to go in there. We'd have to haul this bucket of hot water, get the milk replacer in it. I hate the smell of milk replacer to this day because of that. Mix it up, get it in these bottles. And then not only do you have to do that 2 times a day, however many times, 2 times a day that we did it. But they would also die because they came from like local dairies, and you don't know if they got colostrum and all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We learned a lot, though. I will say, like, I think about that. I think of all of the things that we learned, and specifically even about those wattle calves and how it has like served us so well now. But back then, it was just a lot of chores. But we did have a lot of free time. I mean, we truly did. Like, my parents, bless their hearts, let us run wild. Like, we ran wild on that 60 acres.
I lived on a horse. Janelle would make fun of me and say that I ran with the horses. I may have done that also. I was raised by horses.
There's no may about it.
But yeah, so we just had a really awesome childhood. I mean, and then it kind of prepared us for our, I guess you would say, being an adult. But what took us from Wisconsin is Janelle ended up in North Dakota.
I followed a boy who was from North Dakota to western North Dakota.
Yep. And so my parents, I was about, I think it was 15. My parents decided they didn't want to live in Wisconsin at the moment. They decided that it was just not for them. And so I remember, I think Dad was in Pensacola, Florida, working after the hurricane.
Yeah, hurricane.
Doing construction with our oldest brother and then our uncle. And then my mom and me, we went to go live with my grandma and grandpa in Illinois. And luckily I got to bring a horse with, so I still got to do my favorite thing, being with horses. But a stable in Illinois is not the same as being on 60 acres in the middle of Wisconsin. That is for dang sure.
Yeah.
May have almost got in trouble by the cops for riding down the green in the middle of the 2 roads, but you know, it's different. That's a different story. So we were stuck in Illinois. Our grandpa was a pastor at a church there, and so me and my mom helped out in the church there, while Janelle was in North Dakota. And then, long story short, my parents decided they were moving to North Dakota.
I will say it's because I was the favorite child. No, I'm just kidding. It was not because I was the favorite child. It was because I had the first grandbaby, probably. That's probably what.
That, and you were in the middle of the oil field. I think that was.
Yeah, there was lots of opportunity out there
for jobs.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
And so we moved to North Dakota when I just had turned 16. And so that's kind of the story of how we got there. Janelle's story is a little different of the turn of events that happened to get us to where we are. Yeah.
Maybe we'll go into that at another time. But what ended up happening eventually is I met my husband, Ben. He had grown up on a local ranch there in western North Dakota, south of Williston. Is a small little town. Alexander was the place he went to high school and graduated from. And the ranch had been in his family for over 100 years. And when I married him, eventually, like I think within the first couple years, we ended up moving out to the ranch and getting our own cows there. We ended up running an agricultural business that had been in his family for, 30-ish. Well, I think by the time that we stepped out, like 35, 40, I don't know. So a long time. And it served the community. So it was haying equipment. So like big round bales and cattle equipment and bale beds, hydro beds was one of the companies that we sold and all that kind of stuff. And so we just started ranching, and he never stopped. Like that was just part of who he was. But when we started doing it together, that's really when we kind of I got back into animals. There was definitely a portion where I wasn't doing anything with farm animals or ranch animals. And eventually, Trudi ended up meeting someone also from that small little town, and she ended up meeting him and marrying him. And he's got a pretty unique background that I think is just kind of cool. That brings just a little different perspective to it. They raised bison. Yes, not the normal livestock, especially in our area. We were one of the few. I mean, so when I met Eric, we'll just say that we didn't really. Eric was here and there. He was actually living in Grand Forks at the time, and he had come back, and he decided he was going to live there with his parents till he
he had a job in the oil field. He was working in the oil field. When we ended up getting together and getting married, we ended up moving to the ranch because his father wanted to retire. So we took over his little bison operation. They had 25 bison at that time. They had got them, I believe it was in the 90s. I think it was 1993.
And you guys moved to the ranch when, though, just for perspective?
We moved to the ranch in 2012 because we got married in 2012. So it was like 2012. We moved to the ranch in October, I believe. And we took over. And so that was kind of a big deal because before that, I wouldn't say that I ever had been around bison, so I really didn't know what to expect from them. It was a kind of an eye-opener to be just kind of shoved into you have to take care of these now. This is
this very intimidating animal.
Yes, they are very beautiful, intimidating animals, and it was just kind of a big eye-opener to be able to be a part of that. And so me not knowing anything, I didn't really ever hay in my life. None of these things. I didn't really ever drive a tractor except for a small tractor back in Wisconsin when my dad would be like, okay, drive for me. Like I never really drove a big tractor with a loader or any of that stuff. And so he had to teach me all of those things, how to hay out and how to cut, how to do all of those things. And I actually really enjoyed it, even though you're doing it most of the year. Like you start in June, you're going all the way to August. It's not the most glamorous or fun. So we started out with 25 animals. We saved our heifers back and we built our herd up. And I think when we finally had called it quits, I think we were at about almost 200, and that's including in the corrals and out in the pasture with the babies and mamas. We just had a lot of hard years that just didn't go so well. We had a lot of drought in North Dakota. Janelle can attest to that too, because they had to cut back cows. It just was...
Drought is no joke, friends.
No. And it was just a lot harder to have them. It was just a lot of things that were just against us. And so we decided, since we were younger, our kids were younger, we needed something to change. And so actually, being in North Dakota, we didn't ever see ourselves going anywhere else. We loved North Dakota. The winters were harsh. I mean, it was -30 sometimes, and the wind and the snow, it was unforgiving. But it was where we called home. But I remember we went to a condo in North Carolina to visit our grandparents, our bougie sister from the city. She found us this condo in North Carolina. We invited our grandparents. All of us went down, our parents, all of our families. We all went down to this condo. And I fell in love with North Carolina. And that's actually obviously where we ended up. I fell in love with it because you could have the ocean, but you can still be in agriculture. And so it was really cool to see that. And I think that's why we've decided to come to North Carolina. Janelle's story is totally different. She actually left before we did. We were planning on leaving before Janelle had decided she was leaving. Yeah. But she kind of just like tore off away faster than me and Eric. Yeah.
So we just got out of there. No. So some things had shifted within what we were doing with the family ranch that my husband's family owns. And there came a time where we decided that God was releasing us from being there, and we took the opportunity to start over. And it was crazy. Like looking back, we had to get to that point of what happened for us to leave, because we left a lot. We left a lot of friendships. We left our jobs. We left our income. I mean, every source of income that we had, we left on the table back in North Dakota, and we took off across country. And we just said, God, if you're calling us to move and to leave, we're going to follow you and we're going to go. And we came to this raw land in Tennessee, to a shell of a house with no running water. We didn't have a well dug at that time. We'll get into that in a different podcast, but it was just a crazy, crazy time. And then all of a sudden, there goes Trudi.
Well, it's funny that you said that it was like a God thing, like God pointed you in the right direction, because it's kind of what happened with us. Is we were looking for land for actually like a year. I think it was that we were looking for land to open up in North Carolina, and that was going to be like our push. Like that was going to be us. We need to go. Like this is supposed to happen. And we asked our aunt and uncle to go, my aunt and uncle, not his aunt and uncle, because that'd be weird.
Yeah.
They're both our aunt and uncle. Anyways, so they went down the road and they were looking at a place and they were like, oh no, it's too wet. That's a problem. North Carolina it can be marshy. There's a lot of wetlands. And so they were coming back and they saw a sign that had 200 acres for sale. And so he called, my uncle did, and the guy was like, oh no, we just sold 100 acres of it, but there's still 100 acres left. And mind you, it's 6 miles from my grandma's house. I mean, that can't be more of a God thing than it is. And so we ended up purchasing it, and it was just perfect. I mean, we go visit my grandma, and we were with my grandpa before my grandpa had passed away, and we're with my aunts and uncles. So it's kind of a beautiful thing to be that close.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool because Trudi they're not so young anymore, but they're still not quite teenagers. And so my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, her aunts and uncles, they were able to like experience that, like having like some new life brought into it, I think, in a way.
Yes.
And so I think that's really cool. I think all of our stories are just so incredibly crazy if we get down to it, of how everything has kind of like worked and where we've moved. I personally never thought that I would leave North Dakota, but I knew I would never stay in Wisconsin. I always knew that I was going to move, and I don't know why. I don't know how you felt. That's how I felt. But to get to know, like, now we're in Tennessee and we have just this small farmstead compared to
what we came from. That's
the 2,000 acres that we ran on in North Dakota.
It's really funny because in North Carolina, everybody goes, oh my gosh, you have so much land. You have 130 acres. And I'm like, we ran at least, I think it was 2,500 acres that we 360 was ours. The rest was all rented. And I mean, that's a lot. And to these people, they are our people. Now they're our people. It blows their mind because they believe that that's a lot of acreage. And so it's kind of interesting to see that the difference in the places that you go, how much acreage really is to someone. Like it's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's such it's kind of hard for them to wrap their minds around, because that kind of acreage and the expanse that is North Dakota and South Dakota and Montana and Wyoming and right there, they can't understand the concept of what it looks like. But I mean, and something we're going to talk to in the future is also what we could run on that kind of acreage out there compared to where we are at in the South. So we're going to talk about that in future episodes, because I think it's really interesting to talk about that kind of stuff. But yeah, so being in the South, we've been here since 2022. September of 2022 is when we arrived here in Middle Tennessee. And so we are going on, we're just a little bit over 2 years here, and there's lots of stuff that we're doing. We're getting ready to head back into calving in a couple months. Our milk cows are due. They're dried off right now. And we just spent the day talking about our meat birds for the spring for 2025, what we're going to do with all that, what we're going to do with our pastures. And so we're just kind of in a planning stage. And I think you're always in that. You're always like setting goals for the year. And then we all have long-term goals, and then we have short-term goals. And I know that you guys have that as well. So I'm really looking forward to 2025. I think it's going to be an excellent year. I think it's going to come with the hard, because that's pretty much a given, but I think there's some,
I mean, it is a given in this choice of life.
Yeah, but there's some gold. I can see gold. It's coming. And I don't mean anything other than like, there's good times coming. I don't see any gold in my field, just so you know.
No, well, nobody go running, because I don't think it's there.
Yeah, we're not saying there's a gold rush over here. So, all right, we are so thankful that you guys jumped on here to learn a little bit about us. As we go into the future episodes, we will talk more into what we came from and all of the things, what we're doing now. We're going to get into certain subjects and topics, and I'm really excited to do this with my sister Trudi. She's the one who actually brought this up and is like, hey, would you want to do this? And I'm like, she's a very busy lady, so I knew that it was going to be very hard to make her do this. But I think that what we have to say is something that's very important, because you have people from all aspects of life that just are curious about, being on a farmstead and raising your own animals and growing your own food and
just experiences that you have never experienced. Hearing it from someone else can totally help you or get you to where you need to be. So I think it's a really good thing that we share our experiences and just talk it out. And we would eventually love to have questions and answer questions, because I am a big teacher. I love teaching. That's one of my things. I do writing lessons right now, but I mean, I know that Janelle also likes to teach people too, and that's kind of, we get that from our dad. Like, that's kind of our dad. He always liked to teach us, and he was a safety guy, so he did teaching as well. So it's kind of in our blood.
Yeah, I agree. I even remember just a video that got sent to us after he passed away where some lady he ended up meeting somehow, I don't know, maybe in one of his safety classes. And she's like, hey, I have these chickens that I need to process, but I don't know how. He's like, oh, come on over. So there's a video of him showing this random lady how to process her chickens. And I mean, I just thought it was really cool that she sent that to us. But he had a heart for people. And that definitely, I mean, my mom does too. Just don't get us wrong. It comes from both sides. But my dad really did have a heart to share with people what he knew and what he loved. And he wanted to share that with others. And so both Trudi and I take that, and we both want to do that and going forward, and we are doing that. And so we just look at this platform as another way to encourage people that want to jump into this lifestyle or want to learn. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, one thing I want to say is I've heard it, I don't know how many times, I'm sure you've heard it before from people, when they ask you a question and you say yes and you explain it to them and they go, oh my gosh, that's so nice of you to explain that to me, because some people just don't want to take the time to explain that to someone. And that really hurts my heart, like, for them to feel that way, like that they can ask a question and someone just doesn't answer them, or like doesn't give them the time of day. And I think that's really terrible to see that happen. So I don't ever want to be like that, and I know you don't either. So that's why I'm really excited to do this, to just put it all out there and answer questions and just make people not be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. And we're going to tackle the hard stuff too. So we're not just going to talk fluff here. We're going to talk a lot of the stuff and get into the things that maybe are unmentionable that we're going to mention. All right. As we wrap up our first episode, we're going to introduce you to something that we're going to end our podcasts with every single time. And this is something that I decided we should do. And I told her, and she was like, oh, okay. So what it is each of us comes up with a question, and it doesn't have to be like farm or animal related, but it can be. And we have to ask the other person the question. And this is like, we don't give the questions beforehand. So this is spontaneous, and this might go really badly, but we're going to do it. And I never thought of I didn't even think of a question. And I was the one who said, we're doing this. So I know that Trudi has one. So we're going to let her go first, ask it, and I'll answer it. And then by then, hopefully my brain's working enough to come up with a question.
If she doesn't have one, then we can just wait till next time, and then she can ask me a question.
Nope. I'm going to come up with one.
Okay. So the question that I thought of was,
oh gosh,
in a different world, like if you weren't where you are right now, what would be your occupation? What did you always think that you were going to be?
There's two things. Okay. Can I say both of them? Okay. So
Absolutely.
The first is that I thought that I would become a broadcast journalist.
I never knew that.
I wanted to either be like a news person, a news anchor, an investigative journalist. I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go, but that was most definitely like what I wanted to do. And then the second thing was, most of my childhood and teenage years I spent thinking that I was going to become a singer.
Yep. She actually had her chance one time, but she didn't.
It's fine. We don't need to talk about that, but that's truly what I thought. I thought I was going to become like an artist and entertainer of some sort and do that. That was a good question.
You're welcome.
Okay, here's my question for you.
Oh, goodness.
What are you looking most forward to in 2025? And I know what you're going to say. I'm sure of it, but I'm not going to answer it for you.
Wow.
What are you looking forward to most coming up in 2025?
Well, Janelle knows that I've been studying for my realtor's exam. I know this is probably not what she was thinking I was going to say, but
it's not.
No, but I'm actually really excited about it. I am going to be taking my realtor's exam, and I would like to start my new job as a realtor. And I think that's going to be opening new doors and exciting new places. And yeah, I think that's what I'm excited about a lot of different things. And we also are talking about extending our horse stable 2 boarding horses. So that is another thing that we're kind of excited about too. That's something
Super
new
cool.
for us.
Yeah. Income on the farm. Finding the ways
Yes.
to make income. That's a big deal.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us for our first podcast, the Farmstead Revival. Make sure that you hit the follow button so you can know every time we launch a new podcast, a new episode. We are so thankful that you were here. Have a good night, day. whatever.
Goodbye.